Welcome to the programme. Serious failings and shortcomings. That's the verdict from the head of a panel investigating Israel's ill-fated 2006 war with Lebanon. Unveiling the long-awaited final report on the war, Dr. Eliyahu Winograd said although Israel's leaders acted in good faith, the army did not provide an effective response to Hezbollah's rocket fire on Israel. And Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has faced mounting calls for him to step down in the wake of the war's failure. Well, over now to David Chater in Jerusalem, who's live for us now. David, what did you make of what was said earlier?
I think, as expected, the main weight of criticism in this final report fell on the shoulders of the Israeli military. A lot of the criticisms we've heard before in the interim report about the lack of coordination between the military and political leadership. But in one startling phrase, the chairman of the committee said that despite Israel having the most powerful army in the Middle East, they failed to reach a clear or conclusive victory in a war that they had started. Let's listen in to some of the main points that were made.
We have also found a very grave shortcomings in the military leadership to take the necessary action. We came across failure and shortcomings in all actions of defending the domestic front. The management team within the cabinet acted in a very professional manner. However, they failed to rectify or remedy the absence of high-level leadership. This fact can have grave implications on Israel's demeanors. The decision adopted by the Israeli premier and the position adopted by the defense minister. There were substantial positions built on sound grounds with these officials, despite the fact that both the leaders had certain partisan and popular considerations, which can be confirmed. Simply, we believe that the Prime Minister and Defense Minister acted based on their firm faith at that time in the interest of the State of Israel.
Well, David, I suppose the really big question now is, can Ehud Olmert survive? And more importantly, can his government survive?
That is the whole point about the final report. Can Ehud Olmert live through the criticism we've heard once again from this committee? The feeling is that the Israeli Prime Minister will hang very much onto the positive aspects. There aren't many, but there are some there for him. They called the ceasefire resolution, the UN resolution 1701, a milestone in diplomatic terms for Israel. And that's something the Israeli Prime Minister himself concentrated on in his speech last week at the Herzliya conference. He said that, look at the border, the northern border with Lebanon. It's been quiet ever since. That resolution has worked for Israel. And I think that's what he's sticking by. He said that he will stay in position, no matter what, because he thinks that in the end he's rectified the mistakes and he's learned the lessons, the hard lessons learned from the war, and he's the man to make sure that process is carried through because he's the man that made those mistakes. Also, he feels that an early election would not be necessary because that might derail the very fragile peace track that's been started again with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. And I think that's the important point, because the main worry for Ehud Olmert is that Ehud Barak and the Labour Party might withdraw from the coalition. He'll be looking at that report tonight, and he'll be making his decision pretty shortly, probably the next day or two. But it would seem to me that Ehud Barak has more or less read and heard all of these criticisms before in the report, and I think that he knows if he calls for an early election, not only will it destroy the fragile peace process, but it will also give an opportunity for the main opposition party, the Likud, and the Benjamin Netanyahu, to gain power, because all the opinion polls are saying that if we do go to an early poll in Israel, it's Likud who will gain power as a result. So a lot of reasons there for the leader of the Labour Party, Ehud Barak, not to move against Ehud Olmert. And I think Ehud Olmert sees that as a bit of a flak jacket for him. He'll be weathering this media storm for the next few days. But many people say that he weathered most of these criticisms in the interim report, and he can stand through this storm, this media storm that's about to erupt over the next few days.
Well, we shall see, David, what transpires over the next few hours. We know you'll keep us in touch with what happens there in Jerusalem. David Chater there, our correspondent. Let's move over now to Rula Amin, who's our correspondent in Beirut. Rula, the report authors did say quite categorically that there was a lack of communication between politicians and the military, and that both actually missed an opportunity to wipe out Hezbollah. How do you think Hezbollah are going to react to that, and how do you think the Lebanese people are going to react to those report findings?
Well, let's start with Hezbollah. Hezbollah's own television, Al-Manar TV, was carrying that presser live. And just as it finished, they had talked to Muhammad Haidar. He's one of Hezbollah's MP here in Beirut. And he was very clear. He said, and I'm using his words, he said, the findings of the report makes it clear that the choice to resist, the will to fight, is the only way that brings result. And as a conclusion, he appealed to the Lebanese and to the Arab world to support what he said was the resistance instead of plotting against it. So it's obvious for Hezbollah, this is another chance to affirm its victory, to say that their choice to fight Israel was the right choice. And the most important thing that they proved, and to them that is a major achievement, that defeating Israel is possible, that despite Israel's might, fighting Israel is not a futile act. Now, for other Lebanese, whether they're supporters of Hezbollah or anti-Hezbollah, the main things they were looking for was that, is this the conclusions of this report? Is it going to encourage Israeli leaders to come back to Lebanon again, have another showdown with Hezbollah to finish the job, especially with the committee saying that they have to learn the lessons, that even with Israel's will and wish to have the peace treaties with the Arab world, Israel's might is necessary. The question is, will this report encourage Israeli leaders to have another showdown with Hezbollah, or will it deter them from venturing into Lebanon again?
Well, we shall see what happens there, certainly in terms of what the media and the public think there in Lebanon. Rula Amin, our correspondent, thank you for joining us. The top US envoy has called the increasingly violent clashes in Kenya ethnic cleansing. Jendai Fraser also said the United States would be reviewing the more than $500 million it gives to Kenya. Kenyan police, meanwhile, are denying earlier reports of a shoot-to-kill policy when dealing with the ongoing ethnic clashes. Yvonne Ndege is in Nairobi.
Deep in prayer, this man is shouldering a huge burden. Father Dominic is hosting hundreds of terrified people displaced by ethnic violence. He's now worried for their safety.
A big group of youth stormed into the compound of the monastery, armed with the arrows. You see, they were trying to aim at me and the other people. You see, they were all there with their arrows, bows, and all kind of crude weapons, stones, even jerrycans of petrol.
His monastery has been attacked twice in the last week, but the displaced still stay. They say they have more confidence in the church than in the state. These people have lost almost everything they had. They're mainly made up of Kisis and Kikuyus targeted for their perceived support of the governing party. 97-year-old Silvanus Kukubo has lived in this area for 45 years. His house was burnt and his livestock stolen.
I heard loud knocks on my door. My neighbors' houses were on fire by then. I ran into the bushes outside my house and hid. I made my way here. We lost everything.
More than 600 people have sought refuge in this monastery, and there are only 23 monks here to care for them. And after coming under attack several times, their safety is still in doubt. There are only 10 police assigned to protect the displaced. Given the tensions and anger in the region, they are considered too few to safeguard these frightened people. Government representatives say they are doing their best.
We are family on the ground, so we are ready for any challenge they may pose.
Father Dominic and his monks also preach peace to the displaced in their custody. They help them recover from their bad experiences.
Violence begets violence and the country will be destroyed. So our biggest message to the people in our homilies, our sermons, is forgiveness and reconciliation and peace.
And as armed gangs continue to cause havoc in the region, many continue to flee the Rift Valley.